Hi, my name's Rory. I'm from the Gold Coast in Australia. I just wanted to show you what I've done to my 2017 MT-07. I've had a lot of people inquiring about what stunt things I've added, where I've got the parts from and how to do it. I've only just started street biking late in life and I'm wanting to get into stunt riding. So this is from the ground up, ground zero. Can't even wheelie yet. So first thing is to get the bike, which I've done, and the MT-07 over here is what it was originally, and then I've added a few parts over here. The first thing I changed was the handlebars. Now look at the handlebars over here. I put motocross handlebars on there. These are a lot wider and a lot higher than the stock standard handlebars, which gives you a lot more authority when steering, which I quite like. The next thing I did was change the grips over to motocross grips, which are a lot more softer, stickier, better control. The other thing I did for a while, I changed the throttle control barrel over from an R6 throttle control. What this does, it has a larger diameter, so when you pull the throttle on, you don't have to move your hand as much to have more input on the throttle. The only downfall I found with this was that when you're trying to do a wheelie and you want to try and be a bit more precise, it's a lot easier to give too much throttle and then goes back a little. It's very hard to find a balance point, and that's why I'm not going to go ahead with this. I just put the stock standard one back on, so it's a lot more, I suppose, forgiving. You can actually pull it in a lot more and you can adjust it a lot more without it being too aggressive on the acceleration. So I've changed that back to the stock. The other thing I did too was inside the ABS. I disabled the ABS, which was those fuses there. It's got the fuses in there for ABS. I just simply pulled it out and put the spare in there. And then what that does, that stops the bike from going into its anti-skid or anti-on and off with the braking. So when you actually put the brake on, it'll actually do a slide rather than on-off with the braking. The other thing I added on was the Gaza roll cage. This was ordered in from Russia, from Gaza. It's really sturdy. Took about an hour and a half to install. Has the crossbars that go right across the center. Everything's bolted onto the frame. And the other thing I did with the air filter, I changed the air filter, which is a stock one, over to a DNA air filter. It's a lot more, takes in a lot more air, gives it a lot more power, more responsive. Takes about, probably about 40 minutes to do. You just have to take off the plastics on this side, the plastics here, and undo the bolt just under the seat here. There's a couple of bolts there, there, and there, and then the tank will just lift up and the air filter goes in down there. There's 4 bolts on the air filter intake. So it's nice and easy. Swap it over with a DNA, you get a lot more power. The other thing I did was over here. I also cut the throttle tag off the throttle limiter, de-restricted it. It's a little inside there, you can see a little piece of metal. I just simply cut that off with the angle grinder and reinstated it. So it gives it full throttle now instead of being LAMS approved. And that helps with when you're doing wheel stands or finding balance point. If you don't quite get it up to balance point easily, you can just give it a bit more acceleration and she'll go the rest of the way. The main thing is when you're actually changing the throttle plate over, just undo these 2 bolts here only. The 2 bolts are just in there, that one and that one. Loosen them off. Don't loosen the bottom ones off because they're to the right tension on your acceleration. And that plate, once you do undo those couple of screws, the whole thing will just fall out and then you put it all back in together. The other thing I installed was a 1-finger clutch lever. This has been one of the best things I could have ever installed. What it does, it gives you all your fingers on the handlebars and precision on the clutch for absolute control of what you're wanting to do. Now this lever, I bought this from Grandaddo off the internet. about $50. And then also just underneath it, I installed a 14mm master cylinder brake lever. Now this is also from Grandaddo website with the Yamaha bits and pieces, and they're about $70. It comes with the main master cylinder, a little reserve tank, a couple little brackets here. Super cheap. So what that does is controls the rear brakes on the rear tire, rear calipers. So when you clutch up, you go into your wheelie. If you're doing stand-up wheelies, then you can easily come off the clutch, or you can keep it on there and modulate the rear brake at the same time while having good brake control and also good steering control, so your hands don't fall off or come under. And then because the bars are a lot wider, I also installed the starter switch over here a little bit further down to make room. And because the bars are wider, I was able to fit the indicators and everything on there, plus the bar side mirrors on quite well, which is pretty good. The other thing I installed on the rear disc, I kept the brake disc the same. These calipers come off a Kawasaki ZX14. These are both right hand and left hand. If you are going to do it for yourself, try and get two right hand brake calipers. The only reason is because the nipples on this one is the correct location. This one is down low, so when you come to bleeding and getting the air out of your brake system, it's a lot harder. You'll actually have to pull that off and pump the pistons, turn it around, shake it, and try and get the air out. But once you get the air out, she's rock solid. But it does make it a lot easier if you have two right hand side 108mm brake calipers with a ZX14, which was super cheap. The bracket that it sits on with the ABS function, this was from Extreme Creations down in Sydney. They supplied that for me, and they also supplied the color-coded braided brake lines. You can get them in any color you want, and the specified length that goes all the way up to the left-hand brake lever. This is an example of what the stock bracket used to look like. It only had one piston. Now we've got 4 pistons on each caliper, so it's tremendous braking power. So what you do have to be careful of is that when you do pull in the brake lever on the front, not to pull it too tight, because it will lock up, or if you're doing a wheel stand, it'll probably end up mouse trapping you. So you just got to be careful of how much power you've got to give the brake lever. Also the rear sprocket, I changed the rear sprocket from a 44 tooth to a 48, and down on the front I changed the stock 16 sprocket down to a 15, so it's running a 1548 with a brand new gold chain. The rear sprocket here is made out of solid steel. I know it's heavier, but it's also sturdier and stronger, so it's going to hopefully last longer. Another item I also changed was the tyre valve. I put a 90-degree one on there because it's a lot easier to pump the tyre on and off when you're doing different tricks that you want to set the tyre at different pressures. It's far easier than the standard one, which comes up straight up into here when you've got no room to put any sort of pump applicator on there. So going the 90-degree bend valve was an absolute godsend. I highly recommend it to everyone.
Took off my pants, but then I turned on the TV, and that's about the time she walked away from me. Nobody likes you when you're 23, and I still more abuse my TV shows. What the hell is ADD? My friends say I should act my age. What's my age again? What's my age again? But later on the drive home, I called her mom from a payphone. I said I was the cops and your husband's in jail. The state looks down on sodomy, and that's about the time that bitch hung up on me. Nobody likes you when you're 23, and I still